Good afternoon. This is Sean Golding with Golding and Golding, here to discuss the basics of what is tax evasion, right? It's very common for taxpayers who make any sort of mistake, inaccuracy, maybe slightly bad decision when it comes to taxes to automatically assume that they committed tax evasion. And 99% of the time, that's not correct. That's just human nature, right? Your brain goes to the worst case scenario and you worry about the IRS because the IRS can be annoying to deal with. And of course, there's all the fear mongering out there that doesn't help the situation. So from a technical and the concept of tax evasion is just kind of used nebulously, as in like anything that someone does is tax evasion, but obviously that's not correct. There's a specific code, section 26 USC 7201, okay? Tax evasion is the idea of you're attempting to evade tax or evade payment, okay? Unlike other tax crimes, what makes tax evasion serious or more serious is that it's a felony. And for individuals, they can typically get up to 5 years in prison for that charge alone. Typically, it's going to be 18 months to 5 years, depending on if it's a first offense, what the situation is, how much money is due, and where was payment made. A lot of times, if someone committed a form of tax evasion, they know they did, charges have been brought or may be brought, and then the person already goes back and pays the government that money, they can get a much reduced sentence. So what are some examples of tax evasion, right? The most common example, if a person affirmatively files a tax return and excludes income from the tax return. So David has a company. As part of his earnings, David gets cash payments, right? Those cash payments don't make their way onto the tax return. That's an example of tax evasion. One important note to keep in mind is that simply not filing a return, which technically is not an affirmative act per se, it's an omission, but it's not an act, for tax evasion purposes, will generally not take you to the level of tax evasion. So that's something to keep in mind. So when it comes to tax evasion, another example would be hiding money when there is a tax liability. So someone owes $100,000 in tax, the government's coming after them, they hide that money under someone else's name, they put it into an offshore account, and then they declare to the IRS that they don't have the money, things of that nature. Well, that would also be considered an affirmative act to avoid payment. So it's either avoiding tax, the assessment of tax, or payment of the tax. One important thing to keep in mind is that the government likes to make an example of celebrities, right? Whether it's Wesley Snipes or Ja Rule, it's just, they know, they don't, the IRS is limited on funds, right? The US government is somewhat limited on funds, and so they're trying to make people pay their tax, and the way you get people to pay their tax is by showing them what the outcome will be. Everyone watches celebrities, and that's why celebrities tend to get picked on a little more than non-celebrities. A couple important considerations to keep in mind. There has to be an affirmative action, right? So just not doing anything, if you owe tax, for example, is not in and of itself going to qualify as tax evasion. Merely failing to pay the tax in and of itself is not tax evasion. If there's affirmative acts to hide the money, put it under someone else's name, make it so the government can't find it, that's different. And one other thing to keep in mind is, since it's criminal, it's a regular criminal case, not like an IRS audit, right? So then the government has to prove the person was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, okay, like any crime. If you're out of compliance and you're willful, there's various programs. Well, let me take that back. If you're out of compliance, there's various programs that you can do. If you're willful, the only program you could really do is the Voluntary Disclosure Program, VDP, which is for domestic and offshore. If you're concerned about tax evasion, that you did something intentionally, things of that nature, reckless disregard, willful blindness, then VDP would probably be the avenue. But if you're just a worrywart, right? You think you committed tax evasion just because you forgot to report some accounts or things like that, total mistake, then there's plenty of non-willful versions available to you. There's the streamlined filing compliance procedures, which is streamlined domestic and streamlined offshore. Both of them are for foreign accounts. U.S. income can also be included. The foreign and the domestic refers to the location of the taxpayer. There's reasonable cause and there's delinquency procedures as well, alternatives to streamlined. Either you're trying to avoid the penalty from a domestic standpoint or you don't qualify for one reason or another. If you're out of compliance, we have lots of information available on our main website, goldenlawyers.com. We have a bunch of sub-websites to help you out as well, depending on the specific topic. You can always reach out and schedule a reduced fee initial consultation if you think it's appropriate. Again, my name is Sean Golding with Golding & Golding. Thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.